Welcome to the Financial Aid Part 2. We're going to be exploring FAFSA and also some of the new updates. But one more time, if you haven't scanned the QR code on the screen, please, if you can just check in, and that's just a way for us to send you the take-home resources at the end of the presentation. And just thank you for being here, and hopefully you learned something new today. We can continue. I will get us started, introduce myself. My name is Nayeli Duenas, and I am one of the College Success Fellows here at 10,000 Degrees, and I will pass it on to the other presenters for today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ana Isabel Perez, pronouns she, her, and I'm the program manager for Contra Costa in Southern Marin.
Hi everyone, I'm also one of the presenters. My name is David Flores, and I'm a College Success Fellow as well.
Thank you, David and Anna. And we're going to get started with a little bit more about 10,000 Degrees and what we do. So 10,000 Degrees mission is to achieve educational equity to support students from low-income backgrounds to and through college to realize their full potential and positively impact the communities and the world. We do this by providing college pathways, awareness and preparation, college financial aid advising and navigation, scholarship and financial aid management, college success support, community college transfer support, and career and graduate school readiness and alumni success. And just to highlight, we're serving 8 Bay Area counties plus Utah. Perfect. We're going to be talking about what is FAFSA, the FAFSA changes and overview, the FSA ID and the role-based experience, inviting contributors. We're going to be talking about the IRS consent through DDX, reviewing tools and resources educators can use to stay up to date on changes. We're going to be reviewing scenarios for the FAFSA application. So we're going to do a breakout activity at the end, and there's going to be space for questions as well. We're going to talk about FAFSA. So FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and it's a free application for students who are U.S. citizens, legal permanent residents, and other eligible non-citizens. And students will have access to federal and state aid. The application will be open December 1st this year, and the priority deadline is March 3rd. And the priority deadline means that students will receive the best aid package and possibly get like state and federal aid. So that's why it's super important to remind our students to meet the March 3rd deadline. But if something happens, students are not able to submit it by March 3rd, the last day to submit the application will be June 30th. But this will not guarantee any state aid. So please emphasize that March 3rd is the priority deadline so students can get the best financial aid package. A little bit more about FAFSA. So after creating an account, students will have access to completing and signing and submitting the FAFSA form. They're also gonna be able to manage their username and password, view federal student loan history, get information on the FSA contact centers, and also access the FSA key resource of information about the federal student aid programs, application process, and the loan repayment options all in one. So students will have to just create an account and they will have access to all this after they successfully create an FSA ID. Perfect. So creating an FSA ID. So when you hear creating an FSA ID, it essentially means creating an account on the student aid website. So it consists of a unique password and username. And it will also give students access to electronically sign the FAFSA application online, allowing students to apply for federal financial aid like grants, loans, and work-study programs. Without it, students cannot submit the FAFSA digitally and access their financial aid information online. So it's super important for them to create an FSA ID. Also, students and parents were going to have to save and reuse the same FSA ID every year to renew the applications. So both students will have to have their own FSA ID and also set up the 3 verification method. And as a backup code or as an alternative verification method, they're going to have to use the backup code that they will receive as soon as they start and create an FSA ID. And we're going to talk about it a little bit more in depth in the next slide. about what that means. So using the multi-factor authenticator means it's a security method to protect the user and the personal information. So it's created to protect the student and the parents' account and information. So it's just important for them to remind them to use an active phone number and an active email to avoid any conflicts and issues later on. So the first step is just log in with the username and password. Step 2 is using the multi-factor authenticator. So either providing their phone numbers, emails, or using the app. But if for some reason that doesn't work, they can use the alternative method, which is the backup code. Perfect. So we just want to take a moment to bring attention to some of the most common challenges when creating an FSA ID as an opportunity for us as professionals and as educators to remind our students about the importance of completing their application as soon as possible, taking the time to complete the application, and also gather all the documents ahead of time, to avoid any like mismatch with their names, date of birth and social security numbers, to avoid getting to avoid locking their accounts after like trying too many times to like log in because they forget their username and password. So it's just a way to remind our students before December 1st to gather all the documents and just stay on track so they can start application as soon as possible. And just also reminding our students that if they encounter a challenge, they're not the only ones, they're not alone. A lot of students are also in the same boat and having a lot of challenges. But hopefully this year, we have less challenges with the application. But yeah, it's just an opportunity to remind our students to get ahead of the game. We can move on. Perfect. So we're gonna touch on the FAFSA submission summary. This is also one of the biggest updates. It used to be the FAFSA submission summary is the updated version of the FAFSA student aid report, but is the same information visible. But the FAFSA submission summary does not have an acronym. So now we're just referring to this document as the FAFSA submission summary. It's no longer the SAR or the student aid report. Perfect. So now a little bit more about an overview of the FAFSA changes. And hopefully this breakdown will make it easier to understand and process all the information. And we also wanted to highlight some of the facts and like topics that we were mentioned already and that will be mentioned throughout this presentation. So this is some of the FAFSA simplification. Starting with number 1, the 2025 and 2026 FAFSA will be open December 1st, as I already mentioned. The FAFSA looks and feels has changed, reducing the amount of questions from 108 to 36. The FAFSA ID will be required to start for everyone, so meaning the parent and the student will have to have an FSA ID to successfully submit an application. Students will need to invite other contributors to complete the section on the FAFSA. And when we're referring to contributors, we're referring to parents. The role-based competition is required, new terminology to learn, new student aid index, direct data exchange, the DDX tool, and also the 20 college listed. And we're going to touch on a lot of it. We're going to touch on these topics later on. Great. So the new terminology to learn. Here are some of the new terms and changes to the FAFSA for the 2025 and 2026. These might sound familiar since these new terms were implemented last year, but we can go over it real quick so we can get a refresher on it. So the EFC, that it stands for the estimated family contribution, now it's referred as the student aid index. The parents, now they're referred as contributor. The student aid report, that stands for the SAR, now is the FAFSA submission summary, like I mentioned before. That's household size, now is family size. And the IRS DRT now is called Direct Data Exchange, DDX. Perfect. So the SAI is an index number used by financial aid professionals when creating an aid offer. So remember in the past, the FAFSA application used to ask about the number of siblings in college, and that will take it into account when reviewing the student application. But now that is not the case. The application will still ask for the number of siblings in college, but no longer take it into consideration. Students can always appeal to the financial aid office if that's needed, And I will always encourage students to advocate for themselves and ask questions, but always utilize the resources on campus, in this case, the financial aid office. And the SAI can be as low as negative 1,500. So students with an SAI between negative 1,500 and 0 will receive the max Pell Grant. So the negative SAI can be used by institutions to determine higher need. So if a student gets a negative number, tell them to not worry. This will not impact them in a negative way. So another big update. So students are not able to list up to 20 colleges on the FAFSA application. In case they're not sure what college they will be attending, or if a student is planning to transferring or thinking of transferring, this will be beneficial for them because now they can list up to 20 colleges. Also, like the housing plans will no longer be asked on the FAFSA, but colleges will ask on their college apps. So family size. Previously, students reported household size based on who lived in the home rather than who was listed as a dependent. But now family size will be pulled from the IRS tool and use the dependents listed on the tax forms as household size. And this item is one of the items the student can edit and correct if it doesn't reflect the number of dependents or number of family size. And the possible impact is the household size on the tax form. It's not representative of the actual household size on so the SAI might increase as a result, but students can always edit it and correct it if it doesn't, it's not representative. Needed documents. So what do contributors need to complete the FAFSA? They need to create an FSA ID for sure. That's like step one. They're also going to need their 2023 tax information, so the tax returns. They're going to need to provide the amount of child support received in the past year if this applies. They're also going to provide the asset information, meaning the value of cash, savings, and checkings, the net worth of investments, and the net worth of any business and farms. And last but not least, they will have to provide a list of the federal benefits they received. And there's the QR code on the screen that will help students and parents gather all the documents ahead of time, but this will also be sent out in the follow-up email at the end of the presentation. And we're gonna move on to the other section of the presentation, and I will pass it on to Anna so she can continue talking about the FSA ID and the role-based experiences.
Before we move on, I just wanted to say something. So if you are trying to scan the QR code, it might take you to a page that says page no found. Just click on where it says go home and it'll take you to the right website. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thank you.
Jonathan.
So now we're going to move on and talk a little bit more about FAFSA, specifically for FSA ID and the role-based experience that's been launched since the 2024-2025. So we're going to go over who needs to have an FSA ID. As Nayeli mentioned, all the contributors need to have an FSA ID. So this is for our students. Anybody who is filling out a FAFSA form will need to create an FSA ID. If there is any students who are married, they will also need their spouse's information, and even if their spouse doesn't file taxes together. For the parents and or step parents of dependent students, if they file taxes together, only one parent will need an FSA ID. If you do not file taxes together, including people who are non-filers, they would both need to create an FSA ID. Parents without a social security number will also need to create an FSA ID. We'll go over the whole steps of what that looks like for those parents. Additional changes that have occurred in the past, we were able to put an email address just for your FSA ID. This year, you do have to verify it. We'll talk about the different three-step authenticator. And then for FSA IDs, they do have to be authenticated with a social security, and or for those that don't have a social security number, they still have to be verified. This can take up to 3 days. It's not uncommon for us to see that they need to get verified. So if you're working with your students or you're working on it, it's okay if it says it has not been verified. If you need to submit additional documents, the FSA will make sure to give you those information. So in order for you to get FSA ID match or for that to get verified, we do have a flow chart. This is also one of our take-home resources. So it's totally understandable if things get a little bit confused or you have to reference this in the future, especially as you're working with students who have different statuses. So the first thing is we're going to be starting with student. If they have a social security number, they automatically get sent to the Social Security Administration. If they figure that's a match, then the information is updated and things are good to go, right? However, let's say the person who's creating FSA ID does not have a social security number. This will be a parent or a step parent for a student who's filling out FAFSA. They will have to answer some knowledge-based questions. If they answer those correctly, then therefore the user will be verified and things will be good to go. However, if the knowledge-based questions are not proving to be correct, there's going to be an additional piece, and that's going to be they're going to have to provide ID proofing or provide additional pieces. Again, I'll go very in detail as to what that looks like, particularly for our parents with no SSN. So as we talked about our parents with no SSN, they do have to create FSA ID now. They're going to have to click the checkbox where it says, I do not have a social security number, which means they're going to have to put additional information. They will put their contact information as normal. Again, always remind them to put like permanent addresses, personal information that they're going to have access to. If the account is still not verified, at that point, they will only have a limited functionality for the FAFSA application until the verification is fully completed. It will bring up these different pieces about the warning if you don't have a social security number, etc. Again, we're just trying to support our students and their parents who might come from mixed status families. For our parents that don't have a social security, they will have to provide a mailing address. And again, make sure that they're putting a permanent mailing address where they're going to be able to receive mail, etc. And if they do need to change, they can change it later on. The mailing address is optional. We still encourage our parents who do have a social security number to still fill it out. But again, this is going to be a requirement for our parents with no SSN, optional for our parents with an SSN. If the parents do live outside of the country, they can still put their address for wherever they live outside of the country. However, the one thing that will change is if there is a phone number, because that's another verification point. If they live outside of the US, they cannot put their phone number. But for parents that do live here, they will be able to do that. And then, as I mentioned, they're going to be doing 3 authenticator methods or 2-step verification. And that's going to come from them being able to verify their phone number. Again, if they are living in the US, we highly encourage this for all of them to put their phone number. An email verification is required for anyone, regardless of having a social security number or not. And then the 3rd step is going to be another option, either an app or also a secret code that parents will have to write down. So for parents that don't have a social security number, like I mentioned before, once they're putting all of this information, because it cannot be sent to the Social Security Administration, they're going to be asked a series of questions, usually that they would only know how to answer, right? It's going to ask stuff like, where was the street where you your most previous address? It will ask maybe phone numbers that you've used in the past, former employers. Again, it's tied to information that they would know. These questions are only going to appear once. And if they're not all answered correctly, they're not going to be automatically verified, which then will lead to our next step. But again, when you're talking to your parents or to students about this particular piece as you're supporting parents, just try to keep them as calm as possible. Just remind them that they just need to look at the questions and answer to the best of their ability. And again, just keeping the calm for them. For parents without an SSN, like I mentioned before, if the contributors have been notified that they were verified because of the questions and you're good to go, things are fine. You can do all of the things on the FAFSA. There's no longer a functionality ability. But regardless of the outcomes, parents do still have created their FSA ID. They're not going to be verified. And if they have not been verified, they're going to have to input their information manually, or do some additional pieces. And again, if they're not verified, their account will be locked for the time being, so they can't move to the additional steps. So for parents that did not get verified through the questions, they are going to be prompted to either call the FSAIC at this particular number, and or in the past, they were also able to give us attestation forms via email for parents to upload those documents. Highly encourage you to, reach out to this number if you have not done that process before. Parents will then receive an email with the documents that they need to upload. This might look like attestation form, again, that it's available on the studentaid.gov website. Parents might also be able to submit either a driver's license, a foreign passport, or state ID. They do have to be valid at this point, so that's a note to just keep in mind. And then they can also include utility bills or any other IDs, or their consulate card. So again, it's just important for them to gather this information and for us to work on these pieces with them as ahead of time as we can, just to ensure that there's no time constraints. Once the documents have been uploaded via email, it can also take an additional 1 to 3 days for them to verify their identity. And then they will be officially verified. As we have talked about, and I know there's always a lot of questions regarding how do we go about all of these pieces with our students from mixed status families, we do want to remind you all of FERPA, or also the Family Education's Rights and Privacy Act. Again, it's a federal law that protects all personal information that is reported in any educational document. This includes financial aid and college applications. And this information will only be accessible to the colleges or to the student who is applying, and includes their financial aid information. That's what we know as the current federal law, as it still applies to our students and our families. So we're going to keep moving with this information. And as we talked about, now that the parents have created their FSA ID, different than how it's been in the past, apart from last year, it was not a role-based experience. It was one application, student will put in their information, and so would the parents, and then things could be submitted all at once. However, that has now changed, and parents and students both have to consent to have their information for FAFSA in order for them to move into the next piece. That means that each contributor has their own section in the FAFSA form, which requires a logging in from each contributor. And that's why it's so important to have all of these steps and all of the FSA IDs created before the application is started, just to ensure there's a smoother transition. Students will provide or answer different questions, and that's going to trigger having the parent or contributor's information. Again, it is really important for students and parents to put their legal first and last name, date of birth, social security number if they have one, and an email. The legal first and last name should match what their social security card or their birth certificate has, just to keep it. Each contributor will also receive an email after they have been logging into the FAFSA and complete their section, and they can go ahead and look at that on the studentaid.gov. Students can later on also track where in the progress of the parent or the contributor, where they're at, and that's how they're going to know if the form has been officially submitted, if there's still pieces are missing, or they can also resend the form in case any of the pieces above were misstated. So again, the FAFSA is not going to be completed or considered to be a complete FAFSA form until each contributor has submitted their part of the form. This can take up to 1 to 3 submissions, depending on the situation for the students, right? Do they need one parent to do an FSA ID or 2 parents? If the student submits the whole application, they will then receive a confirmation page with their student aid index information. However, if the parent is the one that's submitting it, they will only see a confirmation page like, you submitted, but they will not be able to see the student aid index information unless the student logs into their portion of the account. Applications are not going to be processed until everyone submits their portion of the application. I do want to also mention that it is also normal for students and or parents to not see the student aid index information until their application has been processed. So if you have a student who did submit and you don't see that information, don't get alarmed. That also happens. But again, that's why it's so important to fill everything out, because unless we have everyone's information and the application is processed, you might not have those numbers at hand yet. And this is what the FAFSA submission summary would look like. As some of you may remember who have been doing this work for a while, in the past, it was called the Student Aid Report or the STAR. There is a new name to it now, or things have changed. There is a different look, and now we're looking at the FAFSA submission summary. And this is what it should look like. Again, it will say the student's name, when the application was received, and when it was processed. And then it also has additional information. And you can also see those pieces there if you need to do any changes in the future. So now we're going to go briefly on how you're inviting contributors. So this is going to be for our students who are considered to be dependent, and they will be asked to provide information about their parents. As you see on the image on the right is fairly early in the personal information for students. So again, it will ask them this information. The FAFSA considers a parent or their parent to be any biological or adoptive parent. So if they are anything else, if they are were the state or they have a legal guardian, they are not going to be considered a parent, and therefore they will not be considered dependent. But for them, again, it has to be a biological or adoptive parent. Then the student will be asked their parents' marital status, right? Is a parent single? Is a parent married? Or have they been remarried? Based on that response, it will further prompt some additional questions that the student can then answer and see what that looks like for them. And we'll talk about it in the next slide. So the parent wizard questions, it's going to ask different things about their parents, right? Like their marital status, like I mentioned, if they live together, and who has also provided the most financial support. This will help determine who and how many people will have to submit or have an FSA ID to submit the form. And in the past, things have changed in the applications that have come out for this past 2 years. In the past, you were providing the financial information for the parent who the student have lived with for the last 12 months. That is no longer the case starting from the previous application. And now it's going to be, they're going to be talking about the parent who has provided the greater portion of the student's financial support in the last 12 months. And that's why these questions are so important, because based on how the student answers these questions, that's who they're going to have to invite. As you see at the bottom too, if the parent has remarried, they also will have to provide information about their current spouse. So things that you might want to know or have as you're looking into inviting the parents or providing this information to your students. Again, we cannot stress enough having students make sure that they're putting the parent's legal name, date of birth, and social security number. And it's also really important for them to have a mailing address that was used by the FSA ID if their parents don't have a social security. I've worked with a lot of students who did not know their parents' legal name. So again, it's really important to have that information at hand to ensure a smoother transition. The email that was provided does not need to match the one that the parents have used for their FSA ID. However, if you're able to have that information, it's highly encouraged, again, just to keep things a little bit smoother. Only one parent's information is needed if through the form, and then the second parent can also maybe later on invite the first parent if also needed. But again, hopefully things are smooth a lot better this year, and no, you don't have to do two parents if they're both married. Sometimes there's also issues with matching the student and the parent. Like I mentioned, some information might not have been inputted correctly. So if that did happen, you can go back to the application or the student's application and make sure you add all of that information correctly. And then when the student is inviting their parents, whether again they have a social security or not, this is what the page is going to look like. You will know if the student will have to ask for one parent or two parents because they will come up on the left side. You just need to have one parent information on there to continue with the application. If the student does again have a parent that does not have a social security number, there will be a checkbox that the student can also check on there. And then once the students have provided this information on their application or their portion of the application, they will be sent, the parents will receive an email. And this will be the official invitation for the parents so they can start contributing to the application. The parent will then select to log in and they will automatically be transferred to the studentaid.gov website. So again, this is what the email should look like as the parent is getting that information, and it does tell you that all of the different pieces. Now I'll pass it on to David.
All right. So we're going to go through what the FAFSA IRS consent through direct data exchanges, or the DDX. So hopefully we can learn something new through this. So first, we're going to start off with the direct data exchange for a student. So basically, the student must approve or consent to have the IRS directly transfer data into their FAFSA. Basically, it is a tool where instead of them submitting it manually, the IRS can go in and submit the data for themselves. All information transfer will be hidden on the FAFSA, so there isn't anything that will be exposed to other people, as well as your privacy won't be invaded. But if the student does not consent to this, they will be able to enter information manually, but their application will not be processed until the student does consent. So now moving on to the direct data exchange for a parent, it's similar to the student, as the parent must also approve/consent to have the IRS directly transfer data into their FAFSA. All information transfer, again, all the information transferred will be hidden on the FAFSA, so there will be no invasion of privacy. But the only thing that's different is that the only edible items is the family size portion of it. Okay, so what's next? Like, what are some resources that we can provide for students and parents doing this FAFSA application? One of the things that we can do before the fall, one of the things we can do this fall before the FAFSA does come out is, one, we can start supporting our students and families in creating FSA IDs. We can also elevate other financial forms students may need to complete. For example, the CSS profile, which is something that we can also help students navigate towards and continue or start that process. We could also get ahead and start identifying students who may need help navigating certain processes. For example, there may be some questions or maybe some certain situations that may come up during this time, which students may need help navigating through that. We can also start identifying any special or unusual circumstances that maybe we need to start planning ahead, or perhaps even identifying even sooner. One of the things we could also do is leverage the FAFSA delay to encourage students to start applying for scholarships. And some of the important forms that we have here as well, some of the important forms that we could also identify is, for example, the paper form version of the FAFSA. Later on today, you will be receiving drafts of the paper form that will be part of the take-home resources. But for example, one of the things that the paper form is really good at is that we could use that paper form, and one, for technical issues if students aren't able to go into the studentaid.gov website and be able to edit or submit any information. One of the things that we can do for this as well is troubleshooting. So if if students or individuals cannot do an identity match close to the March 3rd deadline, then they are able to submit the paper form version of the FAFSA application. So here are some toolkits, some FAFSA toolkits, and some FSA resources. All the URLs will be listed, so if you want to navigate this at your own time, you're more than welcome to do so. One of the toolkits or resources that we feel like is really important for everyone to navigate through is the NCAN's Better FAFSA. One of the things that it contains is a variety of toolkits to use for FAFSA training, state policy, partner communications, and student/parent awareness. There is also a website that will be a living page of resources that will continue to be added for the next 6 months as we go, as well as you Aspire. So there are student resources that will be continuing to be updated to reflect the 25-26 FAFSA application. There's also the FAFSA simplification, the FSA financial aid toolkit, as well as the NCAN future FAFSA training and the CSAC newsletter. So a little reminder and a little shout out that our 10,000 degree scholarship did open on October 1st. So if you want to go ahead and start sharing this with students or anyone that feels that is in need of a scholarship, we do want to remind everyone that the deadline or the priority deadline will be on March 3rd, 2025. The URL for the scholarship will be listed in this slide. So if you want to go ahead and send this to anyone who needs it, for students in all regions, we do serve it. Like I said, like Nayeli said, we do serve it in a lot of counties. So one of the requirements is you don't need a GPA or a test score requirement to apply. There's no citizen or documentation status required to apply, as well as students pursuing a career program, community college, as well as a four-year college/university. One of the things you do need to demonstrate is financial need. And also, if you want to know how to apply, we have a whole bunch of teams that are here to help at every step, at any corner, to see if there's any questions that you may have. But one of the things you can start doing is submit your FAFSA or California DreamHack application, as well as complete the scholarship application through the 10,000 Degree Student Portal. All right, so we're going to go through some scenarios. This is where we're going to start doing the breakout rooms where everyone can go through these scenarios with a group and seeing what kind of answers you come up with. Okay, so the first scenario, Amy is in the process of filling out her FAFSA. She is a dependent student and her parents filed a joint tax return for 2023. The form requires her to fill in parent information to invite them to contribute to her FAFSA form. The fields required are her parents' legal name, social security number, date of birth, and email address. She fills in the information for her mother, but her mother does not receive an invitation to provide information in Amy's FAFSA. What could be the reasons that her mother did not receive the invitation, and how could Amy fix the situation so that her mother does get the invitation? We're gonna give everyone about 5 minutes in the breakout room to identify the scenario, and then we can come back and afterwards and see if there's anyone that wants to participate and volunteer and answer.
I think I could answer maybe a little bit. We as a group discussed the always like looking for small errors that sometimes we or students do as a whole. You know, like even leaving like a little space between names, extra space, and then if you don't do that on the other side of the application, it could be wrong, or doing lowercase on one application and not lowercase on the other one, that could also be wrong. Or it's just like little things that could trigger those applications that sometimes we don't even see. And if we call FAFSA, then they're like, that will make sure that it's all like capital or not capital, but like everything has to match.
Exactly. There can be a variety of factors that can contribute to Amy's mom not receiving the invitation. So thank you so much for the answer. You're spot on. So one of the things that could hinder this part is that either the student or parent's name is different. So, or they entered the wrong social security number. Perhaps the date of birth could be also wrong. We also want to start checking the FSA ID information to ensure that it matches to what the parent has, or the parent just created the FSA ID and it hasn't been verified, so FAFSA can't match the info the student is entering just yet. So just make sure that everything is perfect, and as well as ensuring that there's no gap or no error, because we just want to ensure that everyone is getting the right help as well as entering the right information. So thank you so much for the answer. And with that, we can move on to scenario 2. Awesome. So for scenario 2 is Jose is ready to file his FAFSA. Jose is a U.S. citizen, but his parents are undocumented. His parents do not have ITINs. Each parent has attempted to set up an FSA ID via the new system for those without social security numbers. His father was successful, but his mother could not establish an FSA ID with the online process. Jose has a FAFSA priority deadline in 3 days. What steps should Jose and his parents take to get the FAFSA submitted by the deadline? What is the rationale? Awesome. Welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone was able to get an answer with your group. So once again, we're going to be asking if someone is able to volunteer to see if they're able to answer or have a solution for scenario 2.
I could go.
Okay.
Well, so my first thing was, were the parents not married? Because if the parents aren't married, then both parents would have to create an FSAID. But if they weren't, then only one would have to. And so that could be a solution. But let's just say like both parents, like, the parents weren't married, then if it was like close to the deadline, the student could do the CATA for now and then wait until the other parent FSAID gets through, and then they could go ahead and fill out the, I forget the name of the form, like the G something form, because you can't have two applications. So that was like something I had to do with some students last year. So
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for providing that answer. Yeah, it can be multiple factors that could hinder or not be able to have this part completed. So I think one of the things could also be is that who was providing the financial support within the last year? Was it the mom or was it the dad? So it can be either or, as well as like what was the mom's like financial, was the mom the person that what was the financial contribution? Or if it ends up being a dad, then it would be like transferring the dad's information from the data retrieval and doing an adjustment on the family size to have the mom be able to like set up the FSID.
I have a question about that clarification, because when we were working with this last year, and I'm pretty sure in my situation, both parents worked. And so maybe that was the thing, but let's just say both parents are undocumented, and let's just say one parent doesn't work, then we wouldn't necessarily need to have, or even any situation, really, it doesn't even have to be documented or not. Would we, well, no, in this case, they're not married, but they live together, biological parents. But you're saying if say one parent didn't work or didn't really provide as much support, you could just say, like, we're just going to do this one parent? Because that was not something that was brought up to me in my like in different situations like this last year.
You want to add any insight, Eli?
Yes, please, Eli, enlighten us.
Um, I actually would probably pass it to Anna Isabel, who is the professional in this space in the financial aid world. So I'm going to defer to someone who's got way more expertise in this area than I do.
I can try to answer this. Sorry, I know we've been passing around. If the parents do live together, according to the questionnaire, as we talked about the parent wizard, both of the parents need to be included in the situation. So they would have to both have it.
That was my understanding. Thank you.
I have a quick question on Isabel. Because in my group, in my breakout room, I was talking with Jacqueline, the other Jacqueline, and she mentioned how in part of the scenario it did say his parents do not have I-10s. So that brings into question like how did they, or what exactly did they put down for that section for like their, say, the 2023 taxes, and if that's like a bigger conversation then. So that's just something that we thought about. But again, this is a made up scenario, but
Well, I mean,
we were
you're
just
bringing
thinking
up a
about
good
yeah.
point. Yeah, if they don't have I-10s, they cannot file taxes under their name. I think there's going to be a lot of disclaimers that can go with this, right? We definitely do have parents with mixed status. We do have parents who might not be using their name when they're working. That does add a different layer to things. And I think those definitely do need to be like case by case. However, let's say the scenario would have been changed and they do have I-10s, and we would try to do the FSA ID with both parents, just given the situation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm loving the discussions. So with that, we're going to move into our last scenario 3.
Wait, I got confused. What was the decided like best course of action in the last scenario?
Yes. So the best course of action would be if the mom was the financial, was the mom the financial contributor? So was she the one that was inputting the tax information, or did it end up being the dad? So in this case, if it was the dad or the mom, then they would need to transfer either the mom or dad's information from the data retrieval and doing an adjustment on the family size. So perhaps the family size was submitted too low, and perhaps that's the reason why the mom wasn't able to establish an FSA ID. Awesome. So with that, we're going to so this is the last scenario. So it goes as this: a college access advisor assists Jeremy and his mother at a FAFSA workshop. Jeremy's mother and father have been separated for a year. While attempting to answer the parent wizard questions for separated parents, the mother indicates that each parent provides an equal amount of financial support for Jeremy, and their shared custody arrangement means that Jeremy lives an equal amount of time with each parent. Jeremy's parent father Jeremy's father pays his mother about $400 per month in child support. What should the Access Advisor guide them in completing the FAFSA? What types of questions might the advisor ask to determine which parent's financial information belongs in the FAFSA, and what is the rationale? And for those who are just incoming, I said previously that if there's anyone that wants to provide an answer for scenario 3.
I can share. For our group, we kind of talked about kind of seeing, they mentioned that they just separated a year ago, but for some forms, you're doing taxes from the year ahead. So we weren't sure, like maybe legally they didn't file separated yet. So maybe their tax forms are still together. That's what we kind of thought about too. And then just kind of going through there and seeing once you kind of click either separated but filing together or separated not filing, that'll kind of help us to like, and hopefully the parents can contact each other mutually to kind of talk about it and discuss everything with the student there too to help out.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes when parents say they are separating, we need to ask whether or not the separation was a legal separation. So did they go through the process of having the divorce and stuff? So that could perhaps be the probability of why they're currently going through this. Another way that it could be fixed is how the taxes were filed. So in this case, you would use the parent information with the greater income. So if the mom made a greater income than the dad, then you would use the mom's tax information or vice versa. And you can also start like highlighting contributes with the additional $400 instead. I hope that I was able to answer the question for scenario 3 for everyone. And with that, we can move on to our next slide. Okay. So with that, we just wanted to give a little shout out about the 2024-2025 trainers and the URL to register for the next upcoming events. For example, our next upcoming event will be supporting undocumented students, which would happen on Thursday, December 19th, 2024 from 9 a.m. through 11 a.m., as well as supporting for next year's. We're going to have one called Supporting Foster's Youth, which is going to be Thursday from March 6th, 2025 from 9 to 11 again, as well as our last trainer, which will be supporting Black and African American youth, which will be on May 7th, Wednesday in 2025 from 9 to 11. And with that, if you haven't submitted your attendance, please go ahead and scan the URL, the code on the screen, and so we can track your attendance and you can get all the resources that we have provided with you today. We also wanted to open up the forum to see if anyone had any questions about the presentation or any questions about the FAFSA changes that are going on currently. So with that, that concludes our presentation for today. If there's any last minute questions that you do have, please feel free to use the email that's listed on the screen, 10,000reviews.org. I'm really happy that everyone came out today to see our presentation. So thank you so much. And I'm glad that everyone learned something new today.